Hi, and welcome to Speechcast, the essential public speaking podcast. I'm Dave Azer, and my goal with this show is to get you to fall in love with and crush public speaking in all of its forms. Every week, I talk to experts and pros in the field of broadcasting and public speaking, and my guest today is an expert broadcaster, Miriam Tapia, who I had the pleasure of working with for numerous years at the CW in South Florida. Miriam's a lifestyle and entertainment reporter for Inside South Florida on the CW South Florida, WSFL TV. She covers the best of what's going on down here in South Florida, from restaurants to the latest events to celebrity interviews. And what's really great about Miriam and why I couldn't wait to have her on the show is that she began her career at the CW years ago as an intern. And I was part of the group that decided she was such a great intern, we were going to hire her. So we did. As a production assistant, she worked her way to producer. She worked her way to on-air talent. And now she's one of the main hosts at the channel. So I'm really excited for her to share her story with all of you. And I know it will inspire you. Before we get to Miriam, just a quick reminder that I would love for you to subscribe to this show wherever you do listen to your podcast. And if it's on Apple iTunes, if you could leave a rating and a review, that would be awesome. Okay, here we go. My conversation with the inspirational and hilarious Miriam Tapia.
This is Speechcast, the essential public speaking podcast. Here's national TV host, public speaking and media coach, TEDx speaker, and best-selling author, Dave Azer.
Miriam, you know I love you. You know I'm a huge fan. It's good to see you. How are you?
I'm doing well, Dave. How are you? I love you back.
I'm good, kicking it in my house, doing a Zoom podcast. So 2021, you know how we roll.
I can't believe it. You would have asked me 4 years ago if you would have had a podcast in 2021. I wouldn't have believed you, but here you are. I'm proud.
How long do we go back? How many years have we been friends and colleagues?
I think 4.5 years. I make 4 years here. Yeah, I think so. Around that time. Yeah.
Yeah, it's been great. I've been so excited to watch your journey and your growth. We're going to get into all of that, but what's really cool is you are joining me fresh off of interviewing Jamie Foxx. You just finished that like 10 minutes ago. You texted me, you're like, I'm going to be a few minutes late. I'm interviewing Jamie Foxx. Oh, okay. Who am I to say no to that?
Oh my God, it's funny because, obviously it runs late and I'm like, oh my God, I have Dave next. I cannot miss Dave. Damn it, Jamie Foxx,
Yeah, no, Jamie and I, that happens a lot with the two of us, It's like I can either do Dave or I can do Jamie Foxx. Yeah.
I can't choose. I have to choose both of you. That's how important you guys are to me.
That's a big day for you. Big day for you. You get an Oscar winner and you get me. So
oh my God. I can't with you. I can't.
Okay, so for people listening who are just loving this right now, who want to be TV hosts, you're a TV host. You just interviewed a mega star. What just happened? How did the interview go with Jamie Foxx?
Jamie Foxx is on a press tour. So nowadays it's called virtual press tours for his newest Netflix multicam comedy. Netflix is doing this really cool multicam comedy. They did it with Country Comfort with Catherine McPhee. And now they're doing it with Jamie Foxx. And the show is inspired by him and his daughter, Corinne. So obviously he's doing the press tour, talking about it, zhuzhing it up. The show premieres in 2 weeks on Netflix. And of course, he's talking all that good stuff about working with his daughter. His daughter is now, his boss. So that, changes things. And it's a fun conversation, talking about being a dad, which, you're a dad, Dave. And it's possibly one of the greatest roles of
the greatest role.
Life.
The greatest role. Yes, without a doubt.
So we dive a little into that. And of course we dive a little into, he was here in Miami before COVID. I told him to pass by the studios, he has to bring back that little salsa he did with, I think, Lisa Petrillo, which you had on the show a few weeks ago. So it's pretty great. And he's great on camera. He's such a great interviewer.
So take us through that process again for people who are listening or watching on YouTube who want to do what you're doing, what I've done, which is be a host and interview these celebs. So you find out you're interviewing Jamie Foxx, you have whatever it is, 4 minutes, 5 minutes, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
What is your process now for thinking about what to ask them, researching? How does that all come together?
So the most difficult part I've seen is that how long do you have with the celebrity, the actor, whoever you're interviewing, right? If you have 4 to 5 minutes, and if it's 2 interviews, like 2 people interviewing, or if it's a one-on-one, you have to ask all of that. Whoever's giving you the interviewee, you got to ask, okay, is it a one-on-one? Is it a 2-on-1? How long do I have? There, you do your research is like, okay, I need to have 4 main questions. And I don't want them the same. That's another tricky part. You don't want to be repetitive. Like, oh my gosh, how did you get this role? Like, oh my gosh, how did you prepare for this role?
You could see their eyes roll when they're asked those questions.
Like,
they're like, I just did this 15 times in a row. Take someone else's tape.
Yeah, exactly. And they get frustrated, and you see it and you sense it. And it's harder when it's on virtually. So, but you can tell they're very irritated by that question. So you have to maneuver that question and just kind of make it your own twist, right? And you always want to start with your 3 strongest questions. You never want to be like asking the throwaway question first, because obviously it's called the throwaway question, because if you have time, you ask it. If not, it's fine. But you always want a question that's very engaging, a fun one, innovative. That's what I recommend, especially with Jamie Foxx, who's such a huge celebrity. You need to be on your toes with that. And you don't know how the interview is going to be. Who knows if he's just a 1-sentence interviewee or he can just ramble on. But he was just, I have to say, he was perfect. He was like 10. What I love is the 10, 13 second sound bites, like, okay, you're giving it to me, that you're giving me what I want. Great. Perfect.
Yeah, he's a pro. He knows what happens next. He knows you have to go edit it. He knows in some cases you have a deadline. He speaks in sound bites. He gets it. I'm curious what your process is with regards to watching other interviews he's done, because again, to your point, you don't want to ask similar questions. I rarely do that. I personally don't like to watch them do other stuff because I don't want to take a question from another journalist. I don't want it to feel like maybe I stole something. So I'm just going to brainstorm and be creative. That's my process. Do you watch other people's stuff?
You're so talented. I feel like you can do that. For me, I do watch it. I do my research because, like, I want to be that different that I don't know if somebody else has done it before, right? Like I used to talk about the superhero stuff all the time because that's my niche. I love my good questions, especially with Jamie Foxx. I did want to add a little, he's the villain in Spider-Man and he's going to be back in that. But, again, you only have 4 minutes and you want to be respectful of Netflix in this case and for Jamie Foxx, that you don't have time to ask that. Like, I wish I could be like, okay, tell me more about Electro. Like, can you tell me like what you're doing? Like, please. But I can't because, you do want to be invited back to these interviews. So you got to make it kind of generic. And something I do is keep it very local. Like I said, hey, you were back in Miami before COVID. You got to come back here, even though it was so quick. But that's my niche. I do it local. I try to make it local.
And it makes sense because your show is a South Florida show. So the people watching your show care about Miami and Fort Lauderdale. They don't care about him being in Buffalo or Kansas City or whatever. Yeah. You just brought up something that I think is, I don't know that it's come up in any episode of this show, but it's so important for a host. And that's restraint. That's holding back. Like, you might have this great question that, oh man, I just want to ask it, but you don't always get to ask every question. And it requires a little bit of discipline, right? When you're working on, against the clock, sometimes, like you said, you're interviewing 2 people and you have to get them both involved. It's hard sometimes to just, pull back that great question I want to ask.
Yeah, it's hard. Before one-on-ones in person, you can restrain a little easier, right? Now virtually, it's hard because you have people wrapping you up. Like before, they tell you to wrap right next to you. Here, you have to look at the box. You got to look at a chat and you're like, oh crap, did I miss it? My notifications are not on. And you're like, oh my God, I'm just going to do it. I luckily, knock on wood, have not gotten wrapped before that they could just, in this case, they can just chat you out, like leave the room,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. They can tell you, leave the room now. But I haven't gone to that. And, before they would just be like, all right, stop rolling,
Yeah,
but
I remember, so when you're doing these in person, the publicist or whoever it is that's keeping time, when you get to 1 minute left, they'll give you that wrap up, that famous TV wrap up, which essentially means ask your last question, or they prefer you don't even ask your last question because they're always worried about time. They want you to wrap with a minute to go. But I'm like, screw that. I've been waiting 3 hours to interview this dude in the green room. I've got a minute left. So you ask the question, and then the talent starts answering, and you see the publicist like so annoyed that you have the nerve to ask that question.
I love when you did it, so that it always reminds me of like, you know what? You're right. I've been waiting so long. I'm going to ask this question. And, what I'm afraid of now is like, oh crap, they might stop recording. And I'm like, okay, where's the chat? Where's the room? But yeah.
Yeah, that is an interesting dynamic of doing these things virtually. You're doing all your interviews virtually, or I would imagine most of them, not just celebs, people around South Florida. And you're kind of just on the rise in your career. I don't want to say you're just starting, but you've only been at this a few years and you're building this awesome career, which is so cool, but you're still learning on the job. So now you're doing these things virtually. Is it harder for you to interview someone without being in the same room?
Yes, 100%. I got a little taste of doing one-on-ones in person before COVID. And now if you would have told me last year I'd be doing this virtually, I wouldn't know how difficult it is. You don't sense the person virtually. You don't know what mood they're in. You don't know, you can't even talk to your peers to be like, hey, how'd that interview go? I'm going thrown in blindsided, like, okay, I hope this goes well. It is 100% different, difficult, and exciting. It's a thrill, but it's also very boring. I miss the one-on-ones. I mean, it's cool, but I miss the one-on-one person.
Yeah, but it's coming. I think you'll get back to that pretty soon. Let's go back to the start of your career. I love so many things about your story. One of them is that you started as an intern. You did such a great job. Some genius decided to hire you. I forget who that was. Who was that?
I don't know.
That's right. That was me. Yeah. So then we hire you at the CW to do a little on-camera stuff, but mostly produce. So now you're shooting and you're editing, and then you start doing more on-camera stuff. And the one of the things I really want to talk to you about is you mentioned the word niche before. You carved out a niche for yourself. The CW is a comic book channel, a superhero channel. You genuinely love that stuff. So it worked out great that you started getting junkets and interview gigs based on what you love to do. Worked out perfectly.
Yeah, it did. It kind of was like a calling, right? Like I was never meant to be like, I want to be on camera, right? Like I was just there to, hey, you need me to help you produce, shoot, edit, right? I'm here. But when it came to like, I remember the first junket I ever did, it was for Fences, I think, that Oscar winning movie or nominated movie. I still remember because they're like, okay, no one can do this junket, but we really want this junket, And I remember they're like, Miriam, you can do it. And I'm like, oh crap. Okay, cool. All right. I was thrown in there into the wolves, and it was such a great experience that I realized, oh crap, like I really do like this, I like being on camera. I love doing that. And then, with the comic book stuff, I just kind of said, how can I integrate this? Like, how can I be on camera just for this? And I proposed the idea, and I never thought I would get a yes. And it just worked, it worked at the time. And now here we are. It's pretty cool.
And another cool part of that story is that got you on camera, but it's not who you are anymore. You still do some of that stuff, but you are a main host on the CW doing all kinds of stuff. So I think there's a good lesson learned, people listening, that do what you got to do to get on TV. Mm-hmm. Say yes to a junket that you have no idea what to do. You'll figure it out in editing. They'll fix it in post-production. Just get on the air, do some stuff, and who knows where it'll take you, right?
I love that you said that, because that's what I said. I'm like, hey, I'll do my research on it. If I screw it up, they'll fix it in post. I'm not saying that should ever be the way to go, but if you don't know what to do, just go for it. Say yes. and you'll figure it out in the long run.
Yeah. You also said something pretty interesting a few minutes ago, which is that in the beginning of your career on the CW, you didn't necessarily go into it wanting to be on camera. And most people who are on camera want to be on camera, right? They grow up, they're actors, they're singers, whatever. They just want to be hosts. I knew it from the time I was in middle school. I wanted to be on camera. I told anybody who would listen and even people who wouldn't listen. But you were like, oh, I can shoot, I can edit, whatever. And then it just sort of happened, which is really cool. So what would you tell somebody who's getting into TV, not exactly sure what they want to do, but kind of open-minded to all of it?
I think nowadays, and I'm living it to this day, I think nowadays, most companies and most people are not dedicated only to one thing, right? Like, if you just want to be on camera, cool. Okay. But a lot of people aren't looking for that. Right now, it is always good to know more than one thing, right? Like the producing, shooting, writing, editing helped me be on camera. Because, in the back of my head, I'm like, okay, I'm doing my research. That's my writing. I am producing it. So I'm taking the narrative on this, the conversation. And the shooting, well, in most cases, I'm not shooting it. And sometimes I am. That's also taking control of the narrative. So you being on camera is just a bow on the present and be like, okay, this is how you're just shaping it up. So I think it's always good to not only know one thing, but know several, and that's so key.
Yeah, because at the heart of it, what we are is storytellers.
Mm-hmm.
And telling a story is not just holding a microphone. It's everything you just said. It's how a shot is framed. It's how a piece is edited. It's the writing of it. So when you're out in the field doing something, in your mind, you are already conceptualizing how it's going to look, sound, and feel. It's like we said about Jamie Foxx a few minutes ago. He's giving you sound bites because he knows what you need. And you know how to craft an entire story because of all of your experience.
Yeah, that's how it goes. You just can't be, if you're stuck in one thing, you'll never advance. You'll never learn. It's a life lesson, right? Always keep learning. So I'm still learning, even being on camera. It's a blessing. It's great. That's how we all improve in life. I think it's pretty cool.
What are some of the things that you learn? You say you're always learning. So you'll go do a shoot, maybe even the Jamie Foxx interview you just did, or maybe someone you interviewed last week. You walk off the shoot and you say, that's interesting. Now I know how to do this. What are some of those things?
So one thing, I'm going to use a recent example. I just interviewed John Cryer for Supergirl, right? He plays Lex Luthor. Big fan. 2.5 Men, huge fan. I was super excited to interview him. Obviously, I'm here to interview him for the show. It's coming to a wrap. It's a series finale, the season 6. One thing their PR people wanted me to mention was their, he did a really good deed in LA about, donating money to this awesome organization called Hope of the Valley. And I got the number wrong because ET Online, that's what they sent me, said $30,000. And he was like, actually, it was $80,000 that I donated. And I'm like, I have to react quickly, right? Like, oh my gosh, that's right. Oh, look, this, I had to kind of like, okay, I messed up, but I'm gonna, fix myself. I can't look bad. That's a thing I learned, I usually don't mess up on air. So it's a thing you learn, like, oh crap, okay, if you need to get your, you need to go to one more than one resource, right? So that was my fault. But then again, it's a learning curve. Like, okay, you don't go to one resource, you go to multiple. You think I should know that, but you have a brain fart. That's life.
No, so. It's a great point. Even some of the more obvious stuff, you're like, okay, that is probably right, but it's going to take me an extra 20 seconds to look somewhere else. Let me just look somewhere else. I used to do that on pronunciations. I would, if someone's name was John Smith, before we started rolling, I would just say, I just want to make sure it's John Smith, right? And then maybe they laugh at you and you make some sort of joke like, you should hear people mispronounce my last name or whatever. Who cares what happens off camera? The only thing the viewer cares about is when they're watching, what are they seeing?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And pronunciation, that's also another key. You have to get it right. But yeah, that I'm still thinking about it. I'm like, darn, I should have just done my research. $80,000.
Yeah, but it's such a small thing, and how you handle it goes a long way towards people laughing with you or just being cool with it.
And if you accept it, that's even better. Like, oh, okay, that's a little messed up, but she laughed about it. It's always cool.
Right. Or you say, I was just testing you, or whatever. Whatever you say in the moment. I was looking at it upside down. Who knows? Whatever. You just say something and then they laugh and you move on. You also, because of COVID, you had to do some more hard-hitting stuff, some more serious stuff than you were doing in the beginning. That is a challenge. That's a big difference. It's easy to interview someone about fun, funny, happy stuff. But when you talk about some serious stuff, there's a learning curve with that. What's been that experience? What's been that like for you?
That's a good point you bring up, because at the time inside South Florida, we were just coming off from Super Bowl. So we were all talking about the parties and the where people were going, who was hosting what. And then we were getting ready to kick off Sobe Wine and Food Fest. And I remember my last thing I did was Miami Film Festival, and boom, shut down, right? Like, okay, we can't have the show go on repeats because people are going to know what's happening, right? Like, we just can't do that. So what do we do? And this is where our editorial meetings came up. And like, okay, what do we do? And the first thing we decided was, okay, we got to do community stories. We got to help out the people. Let's not talk about the virus. Let's not talk about the numbers. No, let's keep that to the news team, right? Let's do a little bit more heartwarming stories. Who's doing what? Who's helping the community? I think that shift was so different for me because, you're talking to people who've lost either businesses or, they've lost relatives, or they've created startups thanks to the pandemic, a blessing through this. So it's difficult. You got to shift and you got to adapt, and you don't want to, ruffle any feathers. You got to know what you're saying, what you're doing to the people that you're interviewing and talking about. Even to this day, even that, tiny houses, that was because of COVID-19. You got to adapt to it. It's hard, but you gotta just know it and learn it.
But you're good at that because you are such an empathetic person. That's if someone asked me to describe you in 5 words, one of them would be empathetic. So I think it probably comes easy for you to listen to people's stories and care and get involved and engaged. Much harder if someone doesn't possess that gene. But now, not only do you have to take on those interviews and be empathetic, but in many cases, you have to do it virtually. As if it wasn't hard enough. Now it's even harder because you're not in the same room as a person. So you really had to learn under some tough circumstances.
Good point, because during the pandemic, I got masterclass, right? And Robin Roberts, she's a renowned journalist. And I'm so passionate that I love learning about my field.
Good.
And I think that's number one. You have to be passionate about what you're doing, right? Whether it's speaking on camera, whatever you do, writing, you have to be passionate about it. And one thing I learned from her, and I learned from you too, is that your number one thing you have to do is listen to the person, not hearing them. You got to listen to them. And that's how the conversation is going to be empathetic or be passionate. And they'll be like, oh, this person really heard me. That's what makes the story. And be like, oh, this person cares. It's no BS. You can see through the BS. But if you can listen to a person, whether good or bad, the story is going to come out flawlessly to you, and it's going to show, and the viewer's going to be like, oh, that's a great story, no matter what.
Yeah. And then you earn the viewer's trust.
Correct.
You can't really fake that. You can try to fake it, but people know. People can tell if you're just reading words off a teleprompter or whatever. Yeah. You mentioned the editorial meeting a few minutes ago. Again, for people who don't know what that is, that can often be a really cool, fun, creative, collaborative process. I've not been at the station in quite some time. I know that a lot of the faces have changed, but when you sit in one of those meetings, What is that process like? Does everybody get to talk? How does it work?
So, compared to the editorial meetings we had beforehand, they're different now. You have like 5 or 6 people in the room, and they will obviously, I hate the word talent, but they will give the people, the reporters, a first word. Okay, what do you have? And then producers, and then higher ups will be like, okay, we'll take all of that, but let's, connect this left and right, right? Like at the time, I remember like, I didn't come up with like, oh, let's go to communities. It was the higher ups who were like, hey, we're doing a segment called We're Open. We got to find businesses that are open. Who's your connections? So that's what happens a lot in the editorial meetings. Sometimes it's different for us because we're not breaking news. We're not live. So I can imagine the news team, rattling up in an editorial meeting like, oh my gosh, this just happened. We have to fix the half an hour show or the hour show. It's helpful, it's essential. If you're in the, journalism field, I would recommend doing an editorial meeting once or twice a week. We do it daily since we have a daily show now. So we do it 8:30 a.m. and it's just a rundown of everything that is going on.
A daily show is so fun. I love doing daily shows, but it's not easy. It's a lot of content. And you got to be on all the time. In my opinion, one of the most challenging things about being a host is that the viewer doesn't care if you don't feel well, or if you're tired and you didn't get a great night's sleep before, or if you're having a fight with your girlfriend or boyfriend or whatever. Nobody cares. They just want you to do your job and perform well. So every single day you're doing a show, there are going to be days when you're just not feeling it. What's been the biggest challenge for you to do a daily show?
I think what you just mentioned, last week, it's all good points that I have referenced, right? Last week, I wasn't feeling good, like I was in the dumps, because we're allowed to have that. We're human, right? I was in the dumps and I had to be on air. Like my first hit was at 10:30, right? And first hit meaning like, okay, there's a talk back with the host and you, right? And that was my thing. And I'm on the phone fighting, like, blah, blah, blah. It's 10:20. I'm putting my makeup on. I'm like, 3, 2, 1, boom. You're there with a smile on your face, like in the back of your head. I'm like, I just can't do it this way. Boom, 10:34. I'm out the door. I'm like texting like angrily, and then 11 o'clock hits. I'm like, okay, I'm back. Yeah, it's hard. Yeah. It's really hard, and you have to set that aside. That's a mental thing. Like, okay, you're fighting. You got to separate your personal with your professional, and you can't look wrong because the viewer's going to be like, oh, she's not 100%.
Well, I always say that you're still going to have those problems after your live shot is over. So what good does it do to be thinking about it during the live shot? Because if you think about it during the live shot, you're going to have 2 problems. 1, that original problem. 2, the crappy live shot you just did because you're thinking about that original problem. So I became pretty good at just compartmentalizing, like, okay, this sucks and it's going to suck again in a half hour when I think about it. But for the next half hour, I'm not going to think about it.
I 100% agree. I didn't realize it until I was going through it. I'm like, okay, it's 10:30. I'm doing this. I'm still thinking about it. 10:34. I'm out. And I'm like, oh! Then I'm back and I'm like, okay, I can't deal with that right now. I have to memorize my lines because, it's harder now because I don't have a teleprompter with me because I'm virtual. And I'm just like, okay, I got to remember this. I got to throw whatever it is.
Let's talk about that from an advice perspective. Memorizing versus having a teleprompter. Obviously, a teleprompter, you don't have to memorize anything. You just have to be skilled at reading a teleprompter, which is a skill. So now you got to memorize stuff. What is your process? How do you do it?
So there's several stuff, right? You say it as many times as you can, right, in your head, and it'll just stick there. Or life hack, I have lights here, right? And whatever word I can't remember, I get a piece of paper, I write it, I stick it on the light, and you put it eye level sometimes, and you're just like da da da, or you're looking around the room, you look at the word, and you're like da da da. That's a little life hack. I don't recommend it, but if you're in that dire need, that's a little life hack you can do.
I do recommend it. I think that's fine as long as, to your point, you can make it look like you're
Yes.
just kind of deep in thought and you're just looking off to the side quickly, right? Or you're just, doing something emotional with your face when in actuality you're reading. We, back in my Nickelodeon days, we would have a note card scotch taped underneath the camera lens. And what I would do is if I needed to read like some words, oftentimes I would point to the audience. I'd be like, oh, the crowd over there is fired up. So when I would do that, the camera guy would pan to the audience and I'm off camera now, but I'm wrapping my head around the lens, reading. I know they can't see me. I'm like underneath the note card, just reading words while the camera is over at the audience. I'm all for it if you can get away with it.
Yeah. And that's such a great life hack. I learned that actually on Instagram, which is, that's been a savior of mine, learning little life hacks. Also, another thing, if like you're on a live shot and they put B-roll with footage over you, you have your notes, right? And you're like literally looking at like, okay, and you know that they're doing that. But once, you have a feeling they're going to come back to you, you just hit your live and then boom, you're back on camera. Right. But that's a little bit more skilled.
But it's happened to everyone. You watch your, national news, they'll come back to someone a little bit early and they're just reading stuff, head down. They don't even know they're on camera. It's just going to keep happening. As we wrap up, you are in such a great position I won't ask you your age or say your age. I know the rules about talking to women. I finally learned the rules. I had to get married. But let's just say you're a young lady with your whole career in front of you. What advice do you have for other young ladies and young men who are thinking about making a go of it in broadcasting?
It's interesting, right? Because it sounds like a cliche every time I say it, right? Work hard, say yes to everything, and then, you'll get to where you want. But honestly, yes, that is very true. You need to have that. But if you're passionate about it and if you want to be really good at what you want to do, learn it, love it, live it. It's it's your life, like I feel like my career has gone to where it is and it'll grow. I know it because I am always learning and I'm loving it and I'm living it. So that's the advice I can say. And for those who are starting, it's hard, especially now during COVID, it's hard. There's no jobs in the market. Just persist. You never know where the door is going to open. I know from experience, a lot of people have been reaching out to me, especially, like, oh, if you hear of a job or this, I'm here to help, but you just got to be very persistent, patient. But like I said, you got to learn it, love it, live it. That's where
you live that motto of living it, because like I said earlier, I knew you when you were an intern and you hustled and we said, you know what? Yeah, she's pretty cool. Let's keep her. Then you were a production assistant or associate producer or whatever your first title was. I don't even remember. And we were like, you know what? She's good. Let's make her a producer. Then you started producing and shooting and editing. And we said, she should be on camera. And now you're bumping me so you can interview Jamie Foxx.
My God, don't say that. It wasn't my fault. It was Jamie Foxx's fault. But yeah, honestly,
blame Jamie Foxx.
Yeah, it's just, I still pinch myself. I'm like, I can't believe I'm doing this. But honestly, with great, you have to surround yourself with great people. And I surrounded myself a lot with you. You were a good mentor to me. You were a great mentor to me. You still are. I wouldn't have learned a lot if it wasn't for you. I'm not saying it because we're on this podcast. I'm just saying it because in general, you're just a great listener. You're a great interviewer. You're just great overall. So thanks, Dave.
Thank you for reading that script exactly how I wrote it too.
I put it on the light. How did you know?
That's a great life hack. Put the nice things about the host right next to the light.
Yeah.
Well done. All right. Well, look, it's a mutual admiration society because I'm such a huge fan of yours. I think you're terrific and you're such a hard worker and you can't teach work ethic and you've got that. If people want to learn more about you, and how could they not, how can they find you?
I have a pop-in Instagram, so you guys can follow me there at Miriam Tapia. I's for the middle name, but I'm not going to say. But yeah, you can follow me there. I do a lot of fun stuff there, and it's cool. It's crazy. It's fun. And yeah, you can follow me on Instagram.
There you go. It is cool, crazy, and fun, and so are you. And thanks so much. And tell Jamie Foxx, I know you guys are tight now. Tell him I said, hey. What's up?
Yeah. And if people want to watch the show, it's called Inside South Florida. on WSFL TV channel 39 or 11, depending on, your little boxes and stuff. And you can go on our website, WSFLTV.com. All of our stuff is there.
Such a pro. Just plugging your show.
Call to action. There you go. What else do I need to plug?
What a pro. What a pro. Miriam, love you. Good to see you.
Love you, Dave. Mwah.
Always so fun talking with Miriam. She's always such a positive, optimistic person, and I love that about her. If you enjoyed what you heard today, please subscribe to the show. And if you do so on Apple or iTunes, please leave a rating and a review. As you probably know, that's really important for us to grow the show so we can get more ears and eyes tuned in to Speechcast. Thanks again for listening. Thanks again to Miriam. And I'll be back next week with another brand new episode. Until then, have a great rest of your day. Have a great rest of your week. And I'll talk to you again soon.